Do you want to actually grab my coffee? All right, we're good. So whenever you're ready.
Oh, I am coming. I'm coming.
I don't know if they just added this, but we can create a poll on here. So you know how we're talking about asking them? Like, well, now we know what we're going to read, but when we were looking for the fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Future use. We can create polls on YouTube.
Pretty sure that's been a thing for a while. Okay.
I didn't know
here.
if it was integrated. I thought you had to do it like through a third-party site, but either way, we know now.
Now we know.
And
Lannister pride today.
Yeah. Even though we're going to be rocking some... Well, I guess it works. Gryffindor pride today. So we go to see the Marauders in the Gryffindor lounge.
Lannister pride.
Gryffindor. Gryffindor! Pride.
Lannister pride. Because I can't have Gryffindor pride as I am a Slytherin.
You can have Slytherin pride.
We need more Slytherin pride. Too many Slytherins are ashamed to call themselves Slytherins. Come out of the woodwork, guys. It's okay. It's okay to be a Slytherin.
No. Well, I mean, yes, it is okay to be a Slytherin, but... Meh.
That's just because you're a Gryffindor.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But alright.
You be hating.
So, what happened last time on All the Young Dudes? We found out that Lupin can, in fact, not read, but is extremely smart.
Yes, because Sirius decides to dictate all of the information from the books because Lupin has an uncanny ability to remember everything.
Yes. Just read to him. He remembers everything from class.
But in the last chapter, Sirius is listening to the Beatles, and Lupin is like, "Yo, I know all about the Beatles," and Sirius is super excited about that. And him and Lupin talk about
Muggle stuff.
Muggle
things.
And I think they discussed that Sirius can't continue to dictate everything to Lupin, and that pretty much he's gonna have to learn to read at some point.
Yeah.
But
as one does.
Sirius...
It's kind of funny because we're in the process of teaching Ramona how to read, so we can kind of relate.
Yeah.
She's just learning, so.
But I think the biggest takeaway from the last chapter was that Sirius and Lupin bond over their shared love of the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
And Lupin just kind of talks about television and the Beatles and records, and they have a little bonding moment.
Right. You can kind of see the whole relationship build up. Since this is a
slow burn.
Yeah, slow burn of what's it called with Lupin and Sirius love?
Wolfstar.
A Wolfstar story.
Yeah.
You see it. Maybe James won't be Sirius's best friend for long.
I think James will be Sirius's best friend, and I think his relationship with Lupin is going to be
bestest of friends.
Somewhat different.
A friendship, maybe with benefits.
Do new? Should we just start?
Yeah.
Since we only have an hour to stream, we should probably just hop right in and see what happens.
Try to get through as many chapters as we can. Since it's a combined total of 188.
Yeah. All right, are you ready?
I am.
Chapter 12. First Year. Christmas, 1971. Should I wait until he's done gorging himself?
I know, really. Picked the wrong time to eat.
Dude, can you...
Oh, no, I wasn't calling you. It's okay.
No, he came over when I said dude.
Oh.
Ready?
Ready.
Lupin! Perhaps you can tell me. What are the transfigurative properties of lapis philosophorum? McGonagall called out toward the end of their lesson one day. She gave him a very pointed look. The last time she'd asked him a question in front of the class, he'd shrugged and looked away. Remus racked his brain. Well, I think that's the one that turns stuff into gold, if you use it right, and Cleopatra the alchemist used it to turn lead into silver, I think. Correct! McGonagall sounded as if she was trying to mask her surprise. 5 points to Gryffindor, and another 5 for making the connection to Cleopatra the alchemist. She's not mentioned in Transfiguration for Beginners. Did you read that in your history text? Remus nodded, aware that everyone was looking at him. Well, excellent. Some of my third-year students are incapable of cross-referencing their studies like that. I'm pleased to see you're taking such an interest. She addressed the class. And we'll begin discussing alchemy after Christmas, which reminds me, with the holidays approaching, I'd like to ask any students planning to remain at Hogwarts over break to let me know by the end of next week. Thank you. You're dismissed. The class stood up to leave. A few people patted Remus on the back as they passed. Mr. Lupin, if you have a moment, McGonagall said, just as he was passing her desk. His stomach dropped. He'd gone 2 weeks without a detention from her. He should have known something was coming. He stood still, shoving his hands deep in his pockets and staring at his feet as the rest of the class filtered out. Finally, the classroom empty, she walked over and shut the door, right in James's face, and turned back into the room. Well done today, Remus, McGonagall said kindly. You've been doing really well lately. He looked up at her, startled. She laughed. Don't look surprised. I'm very impressed. Professor Slughorn and Professor Flitwick have said the same. I wanted a quick word with you about Christmas. I've spoken with Mrs. Orwell. Who? The lady who runs St. Edmund's. Oh, right, matron. Quite. As you know, the full moon will occur... As you know, the full moon will occur twice in December, the 2nd, that was next week, and the 31st, New Year's Eve. Mrs. Orwell seems to be of the opinion that you'd be better off remaining at Hogwarts over Christmas for this season. I hope you aren't too disappointed. Remus shrugged. I'm not fussed either way. Professor McGonagall nodded, very seriously. I shall add your name to the list then. I'll see you next week, Remus. James invited Sirius and Remus to visit him over the break, knowing that neither of them were facing a particularly merry Christmas otherwise. Remus was forced to decline, even if he hadn't been incredibly shy about visiting James's home and meeting his parents. He was still legally in the care of St. Edmund's local authority and needed written permission from Matron to leave Hogwarts. Sirius, who would have loved the opportunity to spend 2 weeks mucking about with James, racing their brooms and eating chocolate, also had to refuse. His family had made it quite clear they did not approve of him visiting the Potter family under any circumstances. Bellatrix, that bitch! She's been feeding my parents information, he explained darkly. Apparently I've disgraced them enough already. If I go to yours, then it'll only get worse. I'm sorry, mate. Remus went to the edge of the grounds with the Marauders, all to wave them off on the last day of term. We'll send you owls, James promised. See if you can come up with our next plan of attack on Snape. Remus grinned and promised he would try. He hoped that the letters James sent would not be too long. He was the only Gryffindor first year staying behind for the break, and trudged a lonely path back up to the castle. The next day he enjoyed lying in, something they were never allowed to do at St. Edmund's. He slept until 10 o'clock when Frank Longbottom poked his head round the door. Come on, Lupin, you'll miss breakfast at this rate. Remus liked Frank. He had a broad, friendly face and an easy-going manner. He seemed altogether solid and dependable, like an elder brother. He understood that Remus was used to being an outsider and tried to include him whenever possible without pushing too hard. After breakfast, Frank disappeared to the owlery and Remus sat glumly in the common room, feeling the next 2 weeks stretch before him, empty and lonely. He considered a walk round the grounds, but it had started to rain heavily. He played a few of Sirius's records and flipped through a stack of magazines some fourth years had left behind, just looking at the pictures. They were mostly of pretty, glamorous witches and handsome wizards. He supposed it was a fashion mag. The next few days passed in much the same way. Frank would get him up in the morning, he'd eat all his meals with the remaining Gryffindors in the hall, but otherwise he was left to his own devices. He was so bored at one point that he even thought about doing some of the homework he'd been set. He'd been trying to improve his handwriting, but it was almost impossible with the ridiculous feather quills they were provided. No one would answer him properly when he asked why they couldn't just use bureaus. Even pencil might have been better. He actually did try to read for a while, but after attempting a paragraph from his herbology text, he gave up in frustration. He copied out a few of the diagrams instead. Remus didn't mind drawing. He liked the freedom of it. Every day he walked round the castle for a few hours with his map. The other boys had long since discarded theirs, having learnt all the classroom locations after the first week or so. But Remus hung on to his, still bothered by its incompleteness. He'd begun marking it up himself, adding points of interest, hiding places, and the secret passageway he'd found. The rest of the time he spent avoiding the teachers who were concerned about his being alone. He wasn't the only student left in the school, but most of the others were 6th and 7th years, who generally stayed in the library, revising hard for exams or working on their coursework. Slughorn was holding special extra potions classes in the dungeons, but Remus hadn't been invited and probably wouldn't have gone anyway. He practiced a few spells, and entertained himself for a good few hours trying to see how many objects in their dorm room he could levitate at once. He made a game of it, throwing various objects, books, gobstones, decks of cards, up in the air, and trying to stop them before they hit the ground. He had to stop that eventually when Frank knocked on the door and told him irritably to keep the noise down.
So, we're seeing the Marauders map come into shape.
It's the subtle hinting of it is so great.
Slowly just adding things to his map.
It's so good.
Thinking about what is the best tactic to get Snape.
And how incomplete the map is. It's so good. Saturday, 24th of December, 1971. On Christmas Eve, Wow. Sorry. On Christmas Eve, Remus was woken earlier than usual. It was still quite dark. Heavy rain pelted the thick glass window panes, the sound of it loud enough to echo through the empty room. But that wasn't what had disturbed him. The door was creaking open, and someone stepped inside. Sitting up and peering through the gloom, Remus expected to see Longbottom telling him to get up for breakfast. But it wasn't Frank. It was a very soggy and dishevelled-looking boy, with long hair and a haughty face. "Sirius!" Remus leapt out of bed, overjoyed to see his friend. Sirius pushed his wet hair out of his eyes. He'd clearly been out in the rain. He pulled off his heavy travelling cloak, plopping it in a pile on the floor. "All right, Lupin," he grinned. "Freezing, isn't it?" He pointed his wand at the fireplace. "Incendio!" "What are you doing here?" "Had enough," he said simply, pulling off his boots, which were caked in mud. "Got into an argument with Dad, then the whole family got into it. All the usual stuff. Called me a blood traitor, shame of the family, etc., etc. He flopped down on his bed. "So I left." "Wow." Remus rubbed his eyes, awestruck. "How did you get here?" Flu powder? Sirius shrugged. To the pub in the village, then just walked up. Wow, Remus repeated. I'm starving. They sent me to bed last night without dinner. Come on, get dressed, breakfast. McGonagall was not as pleased to see Sirius as Remus was. The two boys attempted to take their seats at the table as if nothing was out of the ordinary, but she appeared at their side almost immediately. Mr. Black, she said, a note of warning in her voice when Remus recognized which Remus recognized from his detentions. What is the meaning of this? I missed you too, Professor. He grinned up at her. The corner of the old witch's mouth twitched, but she kept her composure. You were seen walking onto the grounds from Hogsmeade at 6 o'clock this morning. Do you care to explain yourself further? Sirius shook his head. Not really, Professor. That's pretty much all there is to it. McGonagall sighed, shaking her head lightly. She had the same look of pity she usually reserved for Remus. Very well, Mr. Black. I shall have to contact your parents, of course, so that they know where you are. No need, Sirius replied, nodding at the flock of owls which had just swooped into the room. The largest of these birds, a huge, stately eagle owl, dropped a thick red envelope into Sirius's plate. He looked down at it, then up at McGonagall with a wry smile. I think they know exactly where I am. He picked up the ominous envelope and, without breaking eye contact with McGonagall, ripped it open. Almost immediately the letter began to shriek. The voice was so loud that it filled the entire hall, causing heads to turn. McGonagall winced at the ear-splitting pitch of it. It was the voice of Sirius's mother. Sirius Orion Black! It shrieked. How dare you defy your father in this manner? Remus covered his ears. Sirius remained perfectly still, looking up at McGonagall. Consulting with half-breeds and blood traitors? Turning your back on your family? If your grandfather was alive, he'd have disowned you the moment you were sorted. You will remain at school until the end of the year and think about the shame and dishonour you've brought on your noble title. Don't think we won't disinherit you. You are not our only son.
Difficult voice.
It is. It's not easy. With that, the letter burst into flames, curling and shrivelling into a pile of chalk-white ash. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone was staring. Sirius reached for some toast, put it on his plate, then began ladling scrambled egg onto it, nonchalantly. He glanced up at McGonagall again. You can send Mother an owl if you like, Professor, but I doubt she'll read it. Very well, Sirius, McGonagall nodded. Just try to keep out of trouble, will you? With that, she walked away stiffly, back to the teacher's table at the far end of the hall. Sirius ate his breakfast in silence. Years later, Remus would always remember thinking in that moment that Sirius Black must be the bravest boy in the world.
Aww.
Christmas Day at St. Edmund's was usually an extremely noisy affair. Boys got presents delivered, those with distant relatives who cared enough to send a few sweatshirts perhaps, but not enough to visit. Others made do with the usual selection of donations from the locals, which matron had wrapped up for them. Gift-getting was quickly followed by gift-swapping, and they often passed the morning bartering and trading with meagre items they'd received. They were made to smarten themselves up, then led in a long line to the church where they would sit through Christmas service, bored and slouching. Christmas morning at Hogwarts was a good deal more pleasant. Remus was almost touched to find that Matron had not forgotten him. The post had arrived overnight, and at the end of his bed he found a card from her, as well as a lumpy package which contained a bag of nuts, an orange, and a tin of biscuits. To his amazement, James had also sent a present, His very own set of gobstones. Peter had even sent a box of chocolate frogs. "Merry Christmas," Sirius yawned, opening his own gifts. He had nothing from his parents, as far as Remus could see, but didn't mention it. James had sent him an annual of his favourite Quidditch team, the South End Scorchers, and he had a box of frogs from Peter too. "Merry Christmas," Remus returned. "I didn't get anyone any presents," he admitted guiltily. "I didn't know they would." "Don't worry about it," Sirius replied on his way to the bathroom. "No one expected you to." This troubled Remus, but he tried not to think about it. While Sirius was in the loo, another owl flew in the window and dropped a large, flat, square package on his bed. When Sirius came out and saw it, his eyes lit up and he ripped it open eagerly. "It's from Andromeda!" he explained, pulling the record out, showing it to Remus, who hurried over excitedly. It was another Muggle album. The cover was black, printed with the silhouetted image of a man standing in front of a huge amplifier playing a guitar. He had long, wildly curly hair, stood with his legs apart in a power stance, outlined in gold. "Electric Warrior," the title blared. "T-Rex." "Oh, T-Rex, I think I've heard of them," Remus said, as Sirius flipped it over to read the track listing. "Stick it on," Remus encouraged, impatient. Who cared what the cover said? Sirius did, sliding out the slick black disc and settling it on his turntable. The record began to turn, and the room filled with music, a smooth sliding throb. "Beneath the bee-hop moon, I wanna croon with you." They sat and listened, entranced, stopping only to flip to the B-side. Once it was over, Sirius wordlessly turned it over and began at the beginning again. They alternated between sitting on the bed, swaying slightly to the melody, or nodding their heads as the beats quickened. They shared grins with each other at the catchiest riffs, and lay down to stare at the ceiling for the slower, dreamier tracks. Eventually, halfway through the second listen, Frank came in. "Merry Christmas, lads! Come on, breakfast!" They dressed quickly and went down to the dining hall. The great hall had been decorated garishly by the teachers. Glittering ropes of tinsel in red, green, and gold sparkled from every rafter, hanging down like festive jungle vines. 12 enormous trees twinkled with lights in every corner imaginable, and baubles the size of footballs hung from every branch. After breakfast, the boys ran upstairs to listen to the album again. "This is the coolest thing I've ever heard," Remus declared. Sirius nodded solemnly. Sirius's favorite song was Jeepster. He loved the twanging chords, the aggressive thump of it. Remus liked Monolith best. It was spacey and smooth, the words both nonsensical and meaningful at the same time. It made him feel like he was floating. For the rest of the day, they played the music in the common room, ate their way through the chocolate frogs, nuts and biscuits, and played rowdy games of exploding snap. Meals at Hogwarts were always spectacular, and Christmas dinner was no different. By the time night had fallen, Remus had eaten so much he thought he might never be hungry again. Though he didn't say it to Sirius, who, after all, had been forced to run away from home for the first, if not the last time, it was Remus's best Christmas ever.
Aw. Hi, RJ.
Sorry for all the...
No worries. It happens.
Well,
First chapter, warming up.
First chapter warming up, and I am a little tired, and I'm a little inebriated.
Fair.
Full disclosure.
But, sounds like an eventful Christmas.
Sirius ran away from home.
I know. To be with Lupin. That slow burn is intensifying. We've gone from some friction to now we're getting some heat going.
I think it's still really dwelling in the realm of friendship.
Well, yeah.
The whole like Scar thing in the previous chapters was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. But like this last chapter and the chapter before, it was really like they're really just establishing like a really
Close bond.
close personal bond as friends.
There you
Didn't be.
go. I know. He always has to have like his head against my face, it seems. This is good, right?
It's very nice for the baby.
No, I think it's a good build up to their friendship.
I'm sorry, you're just so cute.
But when you know it's gonna happen, you also see like
Yeah.
little things.
Maybe I shouldn't have maybe I shouldn't have read the little blurb, but this is a slow burn Wolfstar.
Yeah, you shouldn't have.
Because now we're
Like
just
the,
like interpreting everything as like, oh, it's this.
It would
Oh,
have
it's
been
this.
so much better if it was just all of a sudden Lupin leaned over and kissed Sirius. Like, what?
Right. Yeah.
But either way, yeah.
But yeah, like I like
That was a
the
long chapter too.
it was a long chapter, it was half an hour, and I was trying my best.
Mm.
But I think it's very clear that one of the strongest bonds that Lupin and Sirius have with each other is their love of music
and just muggle stuff.
and muggle stuff. And I think the author is actually doing a really, really great job of showing the friction between Sirius and his family without
going overboard.
It's very well positioned that like Remus just wakes up and Sirius is there, and like I'm not gonna lie, I think she writes a child living in a toxic environment very well.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime anything like this happens, Sirius just kind of like shrugs it off as
it is what it is.
I just wanted to be at Hogwarts for Christmas.
Yeah.
And even when McGonagall approaches and he gets the howler, even McGonagall knows. Like McGonagall knows the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because McGonagall has been embedded in the wizarding world long enough to know.
When you get a howler.
Well, not even that. I think she's been embedded in the wizarding world long enough to know who the Blacks are and
100%.
And their reputation. So she knows that, oh, Sirius is here, what's going on? And then he gets the howler and she kind of just listens to it and she's just kind of like.
But here's the thing I don't get, and
she kind of just lets it go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, if this is a mess up on the author's part, but why would the Blacks hate the Potters? Aren't the Potters purebloods? Isn't James and Lily the first time?
Yeah,
they're not.
The Potters are purebloods.
Yeah.
At this point, I think.
So what was the whole thing with?
I think it's
messing with those mudbloods.
Well, she doesn't say mudbloods, does she? Did she say mudbloods? I was reading it, so I was just. I think
so, but I could be wrong.
I think it's more of not pure blood, mudblood. Sorry, mudblood is a slur. Pure blood aside,
fictional slur though.
I think it's. I know, but within the community, you try not to say mudblood.
Okay.
I think it's more the fact that. Sirius A got sorted into Gryffindor, which every Black has been sorted into Slytherin up until now.
Well, yeah.
B, his best friend is a Gryffindor. And he's very gung-ho Gryffindor and is all about that. So I think Walburga kind of has this Dursley-ish mentality of, I'm going to squash the Gryffindor out of you. I don't think it necessarily has to do with, like, pure blood. Ooh. I don't think it necessarily has to do with pure blood, this or that. I think it has everything to do with you're a pure blood, you're a Slytherin, you're a black, blah, 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 and you're not adhering to the
You're
family
not
tradition.
courageous.
You're not adhering to the family tradition, and Sirius is kind of like, F this.
Well, yeah, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, of course, absolutely, yeah. But I don't think it necessarily has to do with whether the Potters at this point are pureblood or not. I think it has everything to do with you're Gryffindor, we're Slytherins. I think it's because I am pretty sure up until this point, like,
Potter should be purebloods. I'm pretty sure.
the Potters should be pureblood at
The
this
only
point.
reason Harry wasn't.
Yeah,
because
because James's father married a witch. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're pureblood at this point.
But was
because
she a pureblood witch? I'm sure there's something on Pottermore we could look up.
But you can trace the Potter
the
family.
lineage.
Well, you can trace the Potter family all the way back to Ignotus, the three brothers, right?
Hmm.
And you can also trace.
But there's, it could have.
But you can also trace
the Wizarding World.
You can also trace the Voldemort's family all the way back to the Pepperells, because Voldemort and Harry are technically related.
Well, yeah,
right. I think in Harry's case, it wasn't until Harry was born that they weren't pureblood anymore, which is also an interesting parallel, because until Voldemort was born, their family was also pureblood.
Yeah.
There is another parallel.
That's true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there is also that.
And Voldemort had some crazy parents. But we're not here to talk about parallels.
No, we're not here to
talk about. We could probably do one more chapter. What do you think?
We have 25 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can do another chapter.
Why? Is the next one really long?
Let me see.
We did that in half an hour. We should be able to get another one in.
I know, but...
And that was a really long
one. All right, we'll give it a shot.
All right.
Chapter 13. First year. Lectuncula Magna. Tuesday, 27th of December, 1971. With Boxing Day over and done with, Remus and Sirius found themselves caught in those strange nowhere days between Christmas Day and New Year's Day, as they awaited their friend's return. Sirius was keen to plan their revenge on Snape. In fact, he was no longer interested in attacking all the Slytherins anymore, wanting to focus his energies on one single nemesis. Remus was inclined to agree. He'd been too furious with Snape to think clearly about it for the past few weeks. He couldn't shake the feeling that Severus had somehow hit upon the exact hex that would cause Remus the most upset. He didn't know quite how the Slytherin boy had managed it, and it was very likely just a clever guess, but he didn't care. We could just get James's cloak, follow him until he's alone, then beat the shit out of him, Remus growled, as they sat in the empty common room one evening. He gripped the arm of the settee as he said this, feeling the leather creak under his grasp. It was getting close to the full moon, and his temper was closer to the surface than usual. Now, Lupin, Sirius chastised smoothly, carrying a pile of books he'd brought from the library. You're thinking like a muggle. If we're going to get him, we're going to get him with magic. Not more books, Remus whined as Sirius plopped down beside him, an enormous tome in his arms. He opened it, and it was so big that the cover rested across both of their skinny legs. "Yes, more books," Sirius replied breezily. "You'll love them once you get to know them, I promise." Remus wasn't so sure about that. It was true he'd grown to quite like their secret study sessions and had been privately amazed at the amount he'd learned. But listening to Sirius was one thing. Sitting down alone and staring at a block of text was quite another thing altogether. Still, Sirius kept promising him that he was getting closer to a solution. "So what's this about?" Remus asked, resigned to his fate. If Sirius wanted to do something, there was very little anyone could do to stop him. You just had to hold on tight until it was over. "Hexes and jinxes. A lot of them are really complex, though. I mean, we're good, you, me, and James, anyway, but I think we should still stick to the basics. Simplicity is key." "Okay," Remus replied dully. He still preferred the idea of a surprise beating. "So I thought we could brainstorm all the stuff we can do and see if it lends itself to any good jinxes," Sirius continued, undeterred by Remus's reluctance. "So I'm really good at transfiguration. I got the best marks even after you started catching up." "Right," Remus agreed. "James is a bit better than me at defense against the dark arts, which you'd think would be helpful when dealing with a slimy creep like Snivelus, but we haven't really learnt any good spells yet, except disarming stuff, and that's no use." He chewed the nib of his quill, considering. It wasn't a new quill, and left a dark stain on Sirius's bottom lip. Remus didn't say anything. Sirius carried on. "James is good at flying, too, obviously, but I don't know if that's going to be any help. Then there's Pete. Good at sneaking around and grunt work, I suppose." Remus thought that was rather unfair. Peter was never top of the class like Sirius and James, but he was generally perfectly competent, usually settling for a satisfactory mark. He lacked the competitive edge James and Sirius had, the desire to prove himself. Remus recognized this well enough. It was enough to just be friends with cleverer, more confident people sometimes. You got a bit of their shine with none of the pressure. "Pete's good at herbology," Remus pointed out, "and potions." "Both useless," Sirius shrugged. "You were the one who came up with the rosehip thing, and we're never going to best Snape at potions. I hate to admit it, but the bastard's too good. Anyway, then they've got you. You're probably best at charms." "Not best," Remus said hurriedly. "I'm good at levitation, I suppose, but that's it." "Oh, shut up. There's no time for modesty, Lupin." Sirius waved an impatient hand. "You pick up spells quicker than anyone. If we find a sufficiently hideous hex in there, I'm counting on you to figure out how to do it." Remus squirmed. He hated when Sirius talked like that, as if Remus was as clever or as gifted as he and James were. He knew it wasn't true, and it embarrassed him. He fought a sudden urge to push the big heavy book off their laps and walk away.
Oh, come on, Remus. You remember everything as it's being read to you.
It was just the full moon, he told himself. He felt fidgety and too hot by the fire, too close to Sirius, whose blood he could smell, mixed in with the unique scent of magic. He vaguely hoped that dinner would be red meat, something he could taste the iron in. "It has to be something big," Sirius murmured, flipping all the way to the back of the book. Remus let out a yelp as the full weight of it thudded against his thighs. Sirius ignored this, running a finger down the index. "Something much worse than the hair thing." Remus shuddered at the thought of Snape's prank. Rage surged up in him again. Or was it hunger? He shook his head, pushing the book away and getting up, pretending he'd just had to stretch. His joints ached already as his body prepared for the coming transformation. "I don't know why you think I'll be any help," Remus sighed, yawning now. Muggle insight, Sirius grinned. Like the itching powder. You can't come up with stuff Snape won't see You can come up with stuff Snape won't see coming. Remus scratched his head, racking his brain. I can't think of anything bad enough, he said. Once we got a bucket of water and propped it over a door, which you have to leave a bit ajar, you know. Then Matron was supposed to walk through and get soaked. Except Matron didn't walk through, the cook did, and we all got served shit food for a month. His stomach growled at the mention of food. It's a pretty tame prank, to be honest. Are you hungry? Can we go down for dinner yet? Yeah, I suppose. Sirius closed the book. We could get a bucket pretty easily, but it seems there's a lot of room for error. And I don't know if it really struck fear into his heart the way we want it. We're marauders. We should be setting certain standards. Remus chuckled as they climbed through the portrait hole. Yeah, I told you it was rubbish. Rubbish. Shame, said... Fuck. Shame, 'cause Snivellers could do with a good wash. Sirius laughed back. Then he froze and gripped Remus's shoulder. Oh, you genius! You bloody genius! What? Remus replied, shocked and a bit annoyed to be shaken about like that. A good wash. That's what we'll do. It's easy, I bet. I'll be back with one of those books. Wait here. He disappeared through the portrait. Remus sighed hungrily and waited. So wait, explain it to me again, Remus whispered as they finished their plates. He used the remains of his roast potato to mop up what remained of the gravy. He might have seconds. He ate like a horse on the nights before the moon. It sounds complicated. It isn't. Sirius shook his head. I reckon it's easy. Weather spells are hard on a grand scale, but this one only needs to be the cloud the size of the plate. He tapped the porcelain in front of him. Would it be like the ceiling? Remus asked, jerking his head up at the charmed rafters. It was raining, as it had been all Christmas, but the downpour vanished before it reached them. A bit, Sirius replied, but smaller, and without whatever charms are stopping us from getting wet. But couldn't he just step away from it? Not if we combine it with a binding spell. But we can't mix spells yet. Well, I can't. Can you? He looked up at Sirius, who was nodding vigorously. Yeah, I've been having a go at it, for your reading thing. It's actually not too hard. You just have to concentrate. That's what they say about reading. Remus sighed. We'll practice, Sirius said firmly. We'll practice loads. Before James and Pete get back, they'll be dead impressed. There was no time for seconds after that, so Remus had to satisfy himself with the remainder of his Christmas biscuits as Sirius looked up weather charms. Once he'd found what he wanted, they took it both in turns to have a go, Sirius reading out the directions several times before they understood them. It was the first time Remus had attempted a spell without having it demonstrated for him first. Daunting to begin with, he quickly understood how the wand movement ought to flow and twist, while Sirius was best at pronunciation. It did take a lot of concentration. It was nearly midnight by the time either of them had produced anything at all. Finally, Remus managed to cast a small grey cloud. It poured from his wand like smoke, then hovered between them for a few moments before bursting like a bubble, leaving only a faint trace of condensation. Sirius grinned broadly. This is gonna work! Saturday, 31st of December, 1971. It was hard to shake off Sirius on the night of the full moon. Remus even told him he was feeling sick, but then the other boy wanted to accompany him to the hospital wing. Eventually, he managed to convince him that he ought to stay behind and keep practicing the rain cloud charm. We've basically got it now, though, Sirius complained. It was true. They'd both managed to produce satisfactory miniature rainstorms. The bathroom had almost flooded in the process. It was just a matter of maintaining concentration and perfecting the binding aspect now. Find something else to do, Remus snapped, halfway out the door, skin crawling, stomach growling. I'll see you tomorrow. How do you know she'll keep you if enough? Remus had escaped before having to answer any more questions. He was getting careless, he thought to himself, as he knocked on McGonagall's office door. Eventually, he'd have to think of a decent excuse for all his absences. They were sure to connect the nights he vanished to the full moon. Eventually, they all did astronomy together. The shack was cold, the walls damp from the relentless rain. Remus wished he'd brought his wand. He'd learnt to cast a good fire charm now, but he supposed it would be no good if there was a fire blazing when he turned. He might burn the whole place down. The transformation came on more suddenly than usual. Ever since Madame Pomfrey had told him they would get worse, he seemed to feel it more. He still fought not to scream, worried that McGonagall and Pomfrey might hear him on their way out of the tunnel. He didn't need any more pity. Sunday, 1st of January, 1972. The next day, Remus could barely get up after he'd changed back. He pulled a blanket round himself instead and lay on the floor waiting for Madame Pomfrey to arrive. Every inch of him hurt, more than ever. His head pounded as if a troll had stomped on it. Every tooth in his jaw ached. The tendons in his shoulders felt as if they'd been stretched so far they'd snapped. He'd broken almost all of his fingernails. There were huge claw marks in the wallpaper. Remus! Madame Pomfrey's soft voice came through the door. I'm coming in now, dear. He closed his eyes, unable to even groan. Oh, she said as she entered the room and found him on the floor. Bad one, was it? Perhaps it's the solstice. I'll have to consult my books. Can you get up, Remus? She touched his forehead with the back of her hand. He opened his eyes and nodded weakly, taking her arm and hauling himself up. That was a mistake. As soon as he was on his feet, his head swam and his stomach lurched. He bent forward and vomited on the floor. Never mind, Madame Pomfrey said, kindly, an arm around his trembling shoulder. She pointed her wand at the mass and vanished in it vanished in an instant. No harm done. Let's get you somewhere warm now, shall we?
See, now that's a charm I want to learn. First charm I want. How do I clean up everything in a swish of a wand?
Especially with all the animals in this house. Hang on 2 seconds.
But I was also going to say, I'm sure the Gryffindors and everyone probably have some crazy parties, and there's always that one person. Oh my god, Lola's clicking on things. There's always a crazy party, and there's that one person that's gonna get sick, can't control their drink, their butterbeer. Yeah, she minimized the window. I thought she closed out of the stream at first. But no, we're good. She didn't actually do such a thing.
All right.
But yeah, I'm surprised they don't teach that sooner. All right.
She wanted to magic a stretcher to carry him back to the castle, but he wouldn't bear the shame of it, no matter how early in the morning it was. They walked back very slowly and up to the hospital wing, where he finally collapsed into a soft, clean bed. The nurse continued to fuss about him, but he was already drifting to sleep. He woke up feeling marginally better. His headache had left him anyway. He blinked blearily, reaching for the glass of water beside him. Someone picked it up and handed it to him. He drank deeply, then set it down, looking up, expecting to see Madame Pomfrey. He jumped. Sirius! He rasped, his throat still sore. God, had he actually been howling? How embarrassing. Happy New Year! Sirius said cheerily. He was sitting on the little wooden stool put there for visitors, clutching a book to his chest.
Is howling like a forbidden thing in the society? Is it like a basic thing? I howled. God, I'm such a basic wolf.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's the pumpkin spice of
werewolfness.
The werewolf world.
Thought I'd Thought I'd come looking when you weren't at breakfast. You all right? Fine, Remus said, sitting up, hurriedly rubbing his head. I get migraines sometimes. I'm feeling better. Good, Sirius nodded, because I've got your Christmas present ready. My what? Remus stared at Sirius warily. His blue eyes were bright and full of mischief. Sorry it's late, he was saying. I had a few last-minute tweaks to make. Here! He handed over the book. It was Remus's copy of A History of Magic. What? Remus wasn't sure if he was just having a very odd dream. Why was Sirius giving him his very own history book? Open it! Remus did. He had hardly opened the book all year, and the pages were stiff and immaculate except for the very first page. Below the title, Sirius had written something in his very own neat cursive handwriting. Remus squinted at it, his mouth twisting with effort. He was already exhausted, and he didn't have the energy for riddles. Sirius, he sighed, you know I can't. Put your hand on it, Sirius said eagerly, stepping forward. Palm flat against the page. Yeah, like that. Now, give me a moment. He withdrew his wand from his pocket and placed the point exactly against Remus's temple. Sirius, what are you doing? Remus was alarmed. He'd never want...
Oh, is this going to be like the assistant on the computer where it can read everything for you? It's going to touch the page and goes into his mind.
He'd never had a wand pointed at him before, and he'd seen Sirius blow up bigger things than his head. Trust me, Sirius shushed him. A look of concentration came over his face. He took a deep breath. Remus squeezed his eyes shut, preparing for the worst. At least he was already in the hospital wing. Lectio nuncula magna, Sirius said forcefully. Remus felt an odd jolt, as if he'd missed the last step on a staircase. It hadn't hurt exactly, and at least his head was still attached. He opened his eyes and looked at Sirius. What was that? Look at the book, Sirius pointed, practically dancing on the spot with excitement. Tell me what it says. Remus sighed and looked down at the book in his lap. It was exactly the same. A blank white page with Sirius's slightly slanted, thick black handwriting. He stared at it, not sure what he was supposed to be doing. Read it, Sirius prompted. Remus looked down and looked at the first word. Happy, a voice in his head said. Remus blinked in shock. He'd never heard the voice before, though it sounded like him. It was almost like the Sorting Hat, only more familiar, less invasive. He looked again. Happy Christmas, it read. Now you can do your own bloody homework from your fellow marauder and friend, Sirius Black. Remus laughed. He looked at Sirius, then back at the page. He split the book open to a middle page, looking at the words printed there. During the late 16th century, Cornelius Agrippa made his greatest advancements in the field of natural magic. Oh my God! Remus exclaimed. He flipped a page again and read more. The voice continued confidently. He could read. Oh my God! It worked then? Sirius asked, beaming. Sirius, this is... You... I can't... How? Oh no, Sirius chuckled. Don't tell me I've messed up your brain so much you can't even form a coherent sentence. Thank you, was all Remus could say. He could feel his eyes stinging with tears and immediately rubbed them hard with his fists. Sirius looked away politely. It's okay, he replied. Now you can help me research my next big prank. Our next big prank. We haven't even got the first one off the ground yet, Remus replied, sniffing hard, pulling himself together. You have to show me how you did this. It must be really advanced magic. Sort of, Sirius shrugged. I got the idea after Mother's Howler, actually.
I thought if you could get a letter to scream at someone, then you could get a book to read to someone. Keeping the voice in your head was the hardest part. I couldn't tell if it was working on me or if I was just reading normally. Works on any book, though, I think. Not sure about any of the other stuff, though, like potion labels or signs, but we can keep working on it.
Remus couldn't stop staring at the book, reading random lines and grinning to himself. He didn't think he'd ever been so happy in his life.
Aww.
So
Yeah,
cute!
it
I feel
is.
like I was too inebriated to read this really well, but it was so cute.
I think the Marauders are such geniuses. Makes me realize just how dumb Ron and Harry are.
Yeah, a little bit. Like
they did some pretty impressive stuff, but
in and of
really,
itself,
it was Hermione who did some pretty impressive stuff.
well, in and of itself, the Marauders made the Marauders map.
And they became Animagi.
And they became Animagi. What did Harry and Ron do? Relied on Hermione.
They
for
killed
everything.
Voldemort.
They did kill Voldemort.
And Basilisk.
And a Basilisk.
Freed Buckbeak.
And freed Buckbeak.
And escaped spiders.
And escaped spiders. And sent Umbridge to the Centaurs.
Yes. Now, fair enough that they did not do that and all alone, ever. That was usually a machine ex machina, or a deus ex machina, that got them out of it. What?
Like what?
The spiders, the car,
Okay.
Buckbeak, the time turner / Hermione.
Yeah, but Hermione had that the whole time.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
You didn't know about it until...
Well, yeah, but if you read
I mean, you could have figured it out, but you probably didn't. The majority of people didn't until that point. Basilisk, Fox with the sword of Gryffindor.
I'm still listening.
What else? What else?
How about 6?
6? What happened in 6? I can't remember.
Dumbledore died.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty rough, yeah.
The cave.
Yeah.
There was
What?
nothing.
No. Except Dumbledore. Dumbledore is an ex machina in himself. The man's the greatest wizard who has ever lived. Although he never became an animagi.
All right, how about that we know of?
That's true.
All right, what about the first book?
That's basically just surprise mom protection.
That does not count.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't.
That does not count. There was no Dea Ex Machina in the first book or in the last book. What?
I'm thinking.
Hmm.
I guess it goes back to the first one, since they're parallel. Mama Magic.
Yeah, but in the last duel between Voldemort and Harry, there is no more Mama Magic.
No. No, there isn't. But there's still the magic of love.
Well, that's
Just
the whole
different
theme of the books, you dingus! Lola, you know.
Either way,
Lola knows that love
there
is
was a lot of
everything.
ex machinas that happened.
Lola knows that love
I'm not
conquers
discrediting
everything.
the story or anything. I'm just saying, Ron and Hermione, or not Ron and Hermione, Harry and Ron probably would have died a few times.
If not for Hermione.
Or the car. Or centaurs.
Have you ever seen the 7 books according to Hermione?
Yes, I have. You showed that to me like 10 times.
Because it's so true.
Every time you see it,
I
you're like,
know.
hey, listen to this.
Well, because
You can read
Hermione...
that, and then the books according to Draco Malfoy, the books according to Ron.
Because
I think there was
Hermione.
one according to Neville too.
Oh, probably. Because without Hermione, where would they be?
Dead.
Exactly.
Voldemort would have won.
That's right.
That's what I mean. The Marauders.
That's why Voldemort was on his thing. Muggleborns, they're bad.
Like,
See, he knew.
Hermione had to drag Ron and Harry kicking and screaming to defeat Voldemort. At least the Marauders are on an equal playing field.
Well, Voldemort's not around yet, right? When they're in like first,
Voldemort's
second.
around.
Yeah, but he's
He's
not a
just
threat
not-
at this point. I mean, he's not out there being a threat
Well,
at
yeah.
this point. He's not like out there being a threat
Well,
until.
they just doesn't.
No,
affect him.
I don't think he's out there being a threat until like 5th year. Because it's not until 5th year where the whole mudblood thing comes into play and Lily is like, you and your pureblood friends, blah, blah, blah. I think that's when Voldemort starts like coming out, being a public figure.
Well, yeah, public figure. That doesn't mean he's not behind the scenes right now doing sorts of
Right,
bad stuff.
but the kids wouldn't know.
Vada Kedavra.
Yeah, but the kids wouldn't know because they're in their first year of Hogwarts. They're not going to know any of that
Exactly. But
information.
so we can't know whether or not Voldemort's out there doing bad stuff yet. They just
No.
aren't aware of it yet.
But I would agree. I think that James, Sirius, Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew are much more naturally talented wizards than, say, Harry, Ron, and Hermione when they started. But you also have the advantage of...
Even Lupin is kind of in the same boat as Harry, where he didn't really have much of a... he didn't get to that experience.
according to this
Well, yeah.
story. We don't know...
I'm sure there is someone out there who has read up on Harry Potter more and could probably... read up on Harry Potter more than us. Like, yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Read up on Harry Potter more on Pottermore.
No, don't do that.
About this that could tell us, like, whether or not the Marauder stuff is canon or not. I'm sure there's stuff out there about the Marauders that is... that JK has, like, confirmed.
JK did put out the entire process for how to become an animagus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy. It's ridiculous.
You gotta wonder if, like, she really thought that through, or if
no, she did. No, she did.
Those things where people kept hounding her on Twitter, so she was just like, "All right, you put a leaf in your mouth, and then you have to keep it there for like 3 weeks."
No. You gotta read the whole. You gotta read the whole thing to understand that it's not just like some shit she came up with out of her ass. It's actually steeped in like traditional.
There's
practices.
a test for your wand and Patronus. Is there a test for your animagus?
I don't think so.
Because the animagus is basically based off of their personalities, it seems.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool if someone made up a test and see like what your animagus would be.
No, that's awesome. I would totally be down for that.
Right?
Would you be a squirrel?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you would be. You have ADHD.
Why would be a squirrel?
Because you have ADHD.
So? Squirrels just... That's speciesist. All squirrel.
Wow.
What are you going to say about red squirrels now?
That they're cute?
They are.
I didn't specify squirrel species. I didn't say a specific species of squirrel. I just said squirrel.
No, but you're referring to me, and mine says gray squirrel, so.
Oh, that's right.
Or was it a red squirrel?
No, it was a gray squirrel.
It was a gray squirrel.
It was a gray squirrel. Yep, what we have in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Those chunky monkeys.
Right? It would be interesting.
Are you Sandy? Is your Patronus Sandy Cheeks?
Yes, that's why I'm terrified of the Alaskan bullworm.
That's why you hate the snow. And the cold.
Just want to hibernate.
That's right. You just, once it's October, you're like, I'm going, I'm done.
And it's why I get angry when you wake me up when I'm sleeping.
I mean, my Patronus is not a gray squirrel, and I perennially am angry when you wake me up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, maybe that's because my Patronus is an owl.
Yeah, there you go.
That's why. Don't wake me up when it's daytime. Leave me alone. But it is an eagle owl.
It is.
It is an eagle owl.
I'm just trying to think what your animagus would be. I don't know. What?
I'm waiting for you to tell me what you think it would be.
I need time to think about it.
All right,
Our
fine.
live stream Saturday, maybe.
All right, think about it, and you'll
You think about what I am.
All right.
All right.
We'll
put
think
some
about
real
it.
Thought into this, not
Okay.
just off the top of our heads. Until then,
If you say anything other than a big kitty.
I'm going to be honest with whatever it is.
All right, fair enough. I'll be honest with mine.
I'm not just gonna say what you want,
I'm not going to say what you want.
unless what I want is, in fact, me.
You want, like, beady or something.
I mean,
Yeah, you want beady.
well, I mean, we did learn that the dog kind of picks up on the owner and mirrors the personality.
Stop it. Ron's
It would-
Patronus. What is Ron's Patronus?
A terrier,
What kind of terrier?
a Jack Russell,
Why?
because he's loyal
No.
and it chases otters.
Which?
Is Hermione?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
Hermione's Patronus. Right. There you go.
Okay.
I'm just saying. Your Patronus is not beady.
Why not?
Because I have to think about it. Just because
And we aren't talking
Dumbledore's
about
is Phoenix.
Patronuses.
All right.
We're talking about
All right.
Magi.
And a Magi is different.
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
because it reflects
Sorry,
the
we were
personality.
talking. All right. I gotta think about it.
Exactly. Think about.
I gotta think
personality.
about it.
All right. Until then, Saturday.
Okay, Saturday. And a Magi.
Reveal it.
Yes. What a stream.